I, a 36-year-old woman, held the position of sales director at one of New York's largest cosmetic companies. My husband Jim, aged 62, was the owner of the company I worked for. When we first met, he was not only impressed with my professional skills but also smitten by my charm. In just 1 month, I managed to make him fall in love with me, and he promptly proposed marriage. Naturally, I accepted. Who wouldn't want to marry the wealthiest bachelor in town? Despite the 26-year age gap, Jim and I never encountered any significant obstacles in our relationship. He had a remarkable tolerance for my occasional complaints about minor issues, ensuring that our disagreements stayed minimal and never escalated into full-blown fights. Jim knew almost everything about me, my desires, dislikes, and even some of my well-kept secrets. However, he remained unaware that I was slowly succumbing to boredom and had been discreetly keeping tabs on my longtime crush through social media. Leo, a 36-year-old man, was a high school crush that I never outgrew. Even now, whenever someone mentioned his name, I would react with teenage enthusiasm. It was because Leo possessed the most captivating pair of eyes on the planet, and he had made me feel truly special with a memorable dance during our prom night, a moment that stood out when nobody else would have me as a date. It completely transformed my life, you know? You can't just forget the person who boosted your self-esteem on the most pivotal night of your teenage years. So, picture my heart shattering when I found out he had married a churchmate 6 years ago. I mean, I was undeniably more attractive than that woman, and I'm sure everyone was wondering why he chose her. That's probably why I immediately accepted Jim's proposal when he asked me to marry him a year later. I knew then that my chances with Leo were gone, or so I believed. One day, a former classmate messaged me with news about Leo and his wife getting a divorce. I was so shocked and excited that I almost dropped my coffee mug. I could hardly contain myself, but I realized that if I wanted a shot with Leo, this was the perfect opportunity. So, after a month, I initiated a conversation with him and engaged in some casual chatting. Eventually, I offered my assistance, knowing that he was trying to move on with his life. Of course, I couldn't reveal how thrilled I was to reconnect with him, but I felt like I was willing to give up everything in my life at that point just to be with him. That included my marriage. It may sound foolish, but let's be honest, any woman in my shoes would probably do the same. After weeks of chatting without much progress, I decided to step up my game and make my move. I asked Leo out for a dinner date while Jim was away on a business trip, and to my delight, he agreed. I wore the most alluring dress from my closet and applied the boldest red lipstick for our date night. Before I knew it, we were in a hotel room getting intimate. We continued to see each other for the next 3 months, and I have to admit that being with him felt just as incredible as I had always imagined. However, something started to feel off. Firstly, he shared that his business was struggling and that he needed $100,000 to cover his losses. A week later, he requested to borrow my Bentley for a week, claiming he needed it for meetings with potential investors to make a strong impression. In that same week, he asked for another $100,000, this time explaining it was for his mother's intestinal surgery. Despite my suspicions, I kept giving in to Leo's requests, knowing deep down that he was only interested in my money. Little did I know, Jim had already caught on. Yes, my husband was aware of everything from the beginning. He knew about my obsessive social media behavior, my daily stalking of Leo, and even the dress I wore on our first date. He had known about my high school crush on Leo, but had never confronted me about it. And what about all those business trips he went on in the past? They were mostly schemes to check if I would cheat on him while he was away. I managed to pass the tests in the first 4 years, but in the 5th year, he finally caught me having an affair with the person I had been fantasizing about. Jim didn't confront me at all when he eventually returned home. He refused to say a word and walked past me as though I were invisible. I knocked on his door that night until my knuckles ached, but he didn't open it. The messages I sent him on the chat apps remained unread. I was incredibly desperate to speak with him so I could beg for his forgiveness, but it was too late. The following day, when I arrived at my office, all my employees were gathered in front of the large monitor, watching a video clip of me kissing Leo inside a restaurant. I was terrified at the thought that there might be more clips to come, so I quickly grabbed the remote and turned off the monitor, On that very day, I received a termination letter without any severance pay, citing unauthorized fund withdrawals as the reason. Shortly after, the bank manager contacted me to inform me that all of my accounts had been closed. When I returned home that evening, all of my belongings were already outside the gate. Can you believe it? I was evicted from my own home after providing him with 5 years of satisfaction in bed. Was I such a terrible wife that he couldn't treat me with a basic level of respect? Did he truly expect me to believe that he had never been involved with other women while he was away? But here I am, 1 year later, with no money, no family to call my own, and nowhere to go. I'm still attempting to reconnect with Jim, but every time I approach him, he closes the door on me. If only I could turn back time, I would never have gotten involved with Leo because he wasn't worth sacrificing my life for. I don't know how to begin, so I'll just go ahead. I messed up badly. I was foolish, and I posted yesterday in another subreddit about wanting an open relationship, which my husband discovered. This led to a massive argument, and he said things I didn't appreciate, so I left the house and went for a walk. A coworker of mine, the man I wanted to have an open relationship with, called me and invited me to his house. Since the conversation with my husband had gotten me nowhere, I decided to go along with it. I asked him to pick me up, and we went to his house. We had a few drinks and went to the bedroom. He turned on the TV and we watched a silly movie for a few minutes. I was feeling adventurous, so I made a move and performed BJ on him. The result was disappointing, to say the least. He ended up in about 20 seconds without warning. Then he pretty much ignored me and went back to watching TV. This continued for about an hour, and just as I was thinking about leaving, he started to initiate closeness. I basically thought, screw it, and went along with it. The Zax was terrible, like embarrassingly bad. He declined to perform BJ on me because his tongue was sore from eating Pringles, so we proceeded directly to intercourse, which turned out to be just 10 minutes of awkward thrusting. He forgot to pull out as well. Afterward, he rolled over and resumed watching TV. I simply got dressed and headed straight home. On my way back, I did some introspection and realized that all I had wanted was some excitement to break free from the routine, and it didn't live up to my expectations. When it comes to actual closeness, my husband is much better than anyone else I've been with, thanks to his extensive experience, and I wish I had realized that sooner. I was also overly critical of him. I mentioned his size in my previous post, but upon reflection, he's around 7 inches, so he's not as small as I made it out to be. I was simply letting a fantasy of being with someone else take over. When I arrived home, my husband was still in the kitchen. I attempted to talk to him, but he just put on headphones and started cooking pasta. Eventually, he removed the headphones and placed the pasta in a bowl. I asked if I could have some, and he replied that he doesn't share and proceeded to eat it all. I was exhausted and emotional, so I simply went to sleep. About an hour later, he woke me up, and I thought he was attempting to initiate closeness or something. But instead, he took my duvet and handed me a towel before going into the living room to set up to sleep there. I managed to get back to sleep after finding a rug. I tried to engage him in conversation while he was on the couch, but he ignored me. I woke up early because it was cold, and the heater in my room was turned off. This extra time allowed me to reflect on how badly I messed up and how I need to become a better wife. Throughout the day, I made several attempts to talk to my husband, but he remained unresponsive. When I tried to initiate intimacy, he rejected me and left the room, which was a first for him. Usually, even if he was too tired for X, he would at least engage in other forms of intimacy. But today he seemed completely disinterested in anything. I also noticed that he hadn't eaten or drunk anything all day. He just appeared exhausted. I attempted to have a sit-down conversation with him, but he abruptly got up and left the house. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. So, I sent him a text expressing my love for him and the need to talk for the sake of our marriage. His response was clear. I do not want to have a conversation or continue our marriage. I will be staying elsewhere until the new year. When I return, I expect you to be gone. This was my house before, and I no longer want you here. I've already contacted a lawyer, and we will communicate through her from now on. I won't be using this number anymore. I've made some calls, and it turns out my husband is staying at my sister's house. I'm worried because she's both attractive and single, and I've known that she's had a bit of a crush on him for a while now. I have a feeling she might use this situation to make a move. I sent her a text to inquire about what's happening, and she replied that she loves me but won't support me after what I did. She suggested that we shouldn't talk for a while. I understand I messed up, but she's my sister, and I expected her to be there for me right now, not playing the role of a housewife to my husband. Karma, that's all I have to say. Update. After everything went down with Leo, Jim filed for divorce. The process was grueling, both emotionally and financially. We had to divide all the assets, and it definitely wasn't in my favor. Jim, being the shrewd businessman he is, had top-notch lawyers. Since I was the one caught in the affair, the court didn't look too kindly on me. I ended up losing the house, a significant portion of my savings, and even my car, a big chunk of what I used to have. While the divorce was underway, Jim started spending a lot of time at my sister's place. Initially, I thought he just needed space, someone to talk to, but it turned out to be more than that. My sister, who I thought was firmly in my corner, began getting very close with Jim. Watching your own sister get involved with your husband amid a divorce is a betrayal I never saw coming. By the time the divorce was finalized, my sister and Jim were officially a couple. They were all over the social scene, attending high-profile parties, going to fancy dinners, and making appearances at events together. Then, not long after the ink was dry on the divorce papers, they announced their engagement. It felt like a slap in the face. They had this extravagant wedding, something straight out of a magazine, and of course I wasn't invited. But in this age of social media, avoiding their wedding photos was impossible. My sister in her designer gown, Jim looking at her the way he used to look at me. Post-divorce, I found myself in a small one-bedroom apartment, a far cry from the luxurious life I once lived. Every time I saw them together, it was a harsh reminder of what I'd lost. I realized the magnitude of my mistake in chasing after a fantasy with Leo, failing to appreciate the solid, real love I had with Jim. And now, he's found that with my sister. Adjusting to single life has been rough. Dating has been a string of disappointments and awkward encounters. The men I meet either don't pique my interest, or they're just not at the level I was accustomed to when I was with Jim. It's like I'm starting from scratch, but with the added weight of my past mistakes. Job hunting has been equally challenging. After the scandal at my old job, where I was a respected sales director, my professional reputation took a nosedive. I've sent out countless resumes, networked, attended job fairs, but nothing has materialized. The industry I once thrived in seems to have turned its back on me. There are moments when I'm alone in my apartment, staring at the walls, where I long for the days when life was simpler. Days when I had a stable job, a partner who loved me, and no worries about my future. I often find myself wondering how different my life would be if I had never given in to the temptation of an affair with Leo. The regret is overwhelming. Seeing Jim and my sister, looking so happy and content, serves as a constant reminder of the consequences of my actions. I lost a good man, a stable life, and ended up alienating my family. It's a tough reality to accept. But that's the thing about life, right? You make your choices, and you have to live with the results, even when they completely upend your world. Now I'm trying to pick up the pieces. I attend a local support group for divorced individuals, which helps a little. I'm learning to live within my means, budgeting and cutting back on expenses I used to not think twice about. I'm also trying to rebuild relationships with old friends I neglected during my marriage. It's a slow and often painful process, but I'm trying to find a way to move forward. The journey is full of ups and downs, but I'm learning to face each day as it comes, hoping to find some peace and maybe one day a chance to start over. In the midst of all the chaos in my life after the divorce, a strange thought began to creep into my mind. Even though I didn't have any solid proof, I couldn't help but wonder if something fishy had been going on behind